The conference hall stretched before Ambassador David Chen like an ocean of indifference. 200 species filled the enormous chamber, their forms ranging from crystalline beings that chimed softly to massive creatures that resembled living mountains. David stood at the podium designed for humanoid species, his presentation floating on holographic displays behind him. Earth offers unique cultural perspectives, David said, his voice amplified across the vast space. Our music, our literature, our philosophical traditions span thousands of years. A being composed of shifting liquid colors made a sound that the translator rendered as a polite cough. Ambassador Chen, we have reviewed your submission. Earth is cataloged as Class 7 sentient origin. Standard trade protocols apply. Please submit your resource manifests to the Commerce Guild. David felt his throat tighten. 6 months of preparation, 3 years of travel to reach this moment, and they were dismissing humanity in under 5 minutes. With respect, Counselor, we had hoped to discuss cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, perhaps even Earth produces adequate agricultural proteins, another voice interrupted, this one belonging to a floating sphere covered in sensory stalks. Your mineral deposits are standard. Your technology is derivative of basic fusion principles. We welcome you to Galactic Commerce, Ambassador. Next presentation, please. The holographic displays blinked off. David's moment was over. He returned to his seat in the observation section, where other minor species representatives sat in similar states of dejection. A reptilian being beside him made a sympathetic clicking sound. First time? Yes, David admitted. They cataloged my people 4 centuries ago. We still wait for someone to remember we exist. The reptilian's translator carried a tone of bitter amusement. Welcome to the galaxy, human. You are unremarkable, and that is your blessing and your curse. The next months passed in bureaucratic tedium. David filed reports, attended subcommittee meetings, and watched as humanity's grand dreams of cosmic brotherhood withered into paperwork. Earth was assigned a basic trade status. They could export food. They could import low-level technology. They were permitted 2 embassy staff members on the council station, 2 people to represent 8 billion humans. On his final day before returning to Earth, David sat in the station's observation deck, watching ships come and go. Massive trading vessels, sleek diplomatic cruisers, elegant pleasure yachts belonging to species whose names he would never learn. A young officer from Earth's security detail found him there. Sir, you should see this, Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo said, holding a data pad. I've been analyzing the Council's historical records. Public database stuff, nothing classified. David barely looked up. Let me guess. More proof we don't matter? Actually, sir, something weird? Sarah sat down uninvited, her eyes bright with excitement. The Council is over 40,000 years old, thousands of species, millions of worlds, right? Your point? When was their last major war? David frowned. I don't know. I assumed they evolved past that. 12,000 years ago, sir. The Conflux Wars, they called it. 3 species nearly destroyed each other over territorial disputes. Since then, nothing. Minor skirmishes, pirate suppression, police actions against criminal cartels, but no actual wars. They learned cooperation, David said. Isn't that admirable? Sarah leaned forward. Or they forgot how to fight. Look at their current defense fleets, sir. The ships are designed for shows of force, not actual combat. Their weapons are meant to disable, not destroy. Their tactics are built around negotiation and containment. We came here for peace, Lieutenant, not to analyze their military capabilities. I know, sir. But doesn't it strike you as odd? 40,000 years of civilization, and they've been basically peaceful for 12,000 years? Sarah pulled up charts on her datapad. Every species in the Council evolved on garden worlds. Perfect temperatures, minimal predators, abundant resources. They developed intelligence for cooperation because they never needed to fight for survival. David finally looked at the data. What are you suggesting? Nothing, sir. Just an observation. But if something ever threatens this peace they've built, I wonder if they remember how to defend it. The journey back to Earth took 18 months. David spent much of it writing his report, trying to find diplomatic language for humanity's cosmic irrelevance. When he finally stood before the United Nations Assembly, delivering his findings, he watched hope drain from faces around the chamber. "They don't care about us," one delegate said bluntly. "We're just another species to them." "We're less than that," David admitted. "We're unremarkable, average in every measurable way." The Secretary-General leaned forward. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" David thought of Sarah's research, her observations about the galaxy's long peace. "We accept our status. We trade. We learn. We keep our heads down. And we watch." "Watch for what?" "For whatever happens when peace ends." The Council's indifference became Earth's strange shield. While other species jockeyed for status and influence, humanity quietly built their presence. They established small colonies on marginal worlds the Council barely noticed. They traded reliably, if not profitably. They studied every scrap of galactic technology they could access, reverse engineering and adapting it. Sarah Okonkwo left the military and pursued xenobiology, driven by questions nobody else seemed to ask. Why had humanity evolved so differently? What made Earth unique? 5 years after first contact, she found her answer. Earth was classified in the Galactic database as a Class 12 death world. The designation was buried in geological survey data, considered irrelevant to civilization planning. But Sarah understood what it meant. Only 3 other Class 12 worlds had ever produced sentient life, and those species had all gone extinct before achieving spaceflight. Earth's gravity was punishing by galactic standards. Its temperature swings were extreme. Its atmosphere had once been toxic, then icebound, then scorched. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, tsunamis. Earth was a planet actively trying to kill everything on it, and humanity had thrived. Sarah published her research in Earth's scientific journals. She documented how humans were persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey for days, how human endurance exceeded nearly every known species, how human immune systems had been forged fighting billions of years of bacterial and viral warfare, how human intelligence had developed not for cooperation, but for outthinking predators and prey alike. The paper went viral on Earth. Humanity devoured the revelation that they were, by galactic standards, impossibly tough survivors from a nightmare world. The Council noticed the paper, too. Sarah received a polite message from a xenobiology committee acknowledging her interesting cultural perspective on human evolution. They filed it under anthropological curiosities and forgot about it. Sarah didn't forget. She continued her research, diving deeper into comparative biology. She discovered that every council species had evolved in environments where cooperation was naturally advantageous because external threats were minimal. They had never needed to become apex predators because they had never faced any. Humans had faced countless apex predators, and humans had won. "We're the only species in the council that evolved to hunt," Sarah told David during one of his visits to her laboratory. He had stayed with the diplomatic corps, now serving as Earth's permanent representative on a minor trade committee. "That's quite a claim," David said, studying her data. "It's not a claim. It's a fact. Every other species developed intelligence for social cooperation, problem-solving, resource management. Humans developed intelligence to predict, pursue, and kill things smarter and stronger than us." Sarah pulled up comparison charts. "We're not the fastest species, not the strongest, not the smartest, not individually, but we're the best at working together to bring down threats." "The Council would say we evolved past that," David observed. Did we? Or did we just redirect it? Sarah smiled grimly. We still compete, David. We still hunt, just in different ways. We've had peace on Earth for what? Maybe a few decades at most throughout our entire history? War is our normal. Peace is our aberration. David stared at the data, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. Let's hope the galaxy never needs to learn that lesson. Yes, Sarah agreed. Let's hope. But hope, as humanity had learned throughout its violent history, was never a reliable strategy. The galaxy's long peace was about to end. The first warning came from the Peripheral Monitoring Network, automated sensor stations scattered along the galactic rim where Council space faded into unexplored darkness. The stations had maintained their silent vigil for 8,000 years, recording cosmic radiation and mapping stellar drift. They had never detected anything significant, until now. The signals reached Council headquarters as routine data packets, processed by algorithms that had run unchanged for millennia. 3 stations went offline. Standard procedure flagged it for maintenance review. 2 weeks later, 7 more stations disappeared. The pattern triggered an alert that climbed through bureaucratic channels at a leisurely pace. By the time actual council members examined the data, 23 stations had gone silent. Councillor Vexithar of the Methodian Collective studied the reports with growing unease. The Methodians were one of the Council's eldest species, crystalline beings whose thought processes occurred at geological speeds. Vexithar had served on the Security Committee for 3 centuries and had never seen anything concerning. This was concerning. The stations do not simply fail, Vexithar announced at the Security Committee meeting, their voice resonating through multiple harmonic frequencies. The pattern suggests deliberate destruction. Pirates? Suggested Councillor Remath, a floating being whose species specialized in commercial law. Perhaps raiders seeking the station's metals? The stations contain minimal resources, Vexthar replied, and the destruction pattern moves inward, toward Council space. Pirates flee from civilization, not toward it. The committee debated for 3 weeks before authorizing a scout fleet to investigate. 6 ships departed, crewed by species who had trained for exploration, not combat. The Council hadn't needed combat-trained crews in 12,000 years. The scout fleet reached the dead zone 6 months later. Their final transmission lasted 47 seconds. Unknown vessels emerging from dark space. Biological signatures unlike anything in the database. They're not responding to hails. They're not, oh gods, they're accelerating. Evasive maneuvers, shields at maximum. They're cutting through the shields like they're nothing. Hull breach on deck 3. They're boarding us. They're static. The transmission played before the full council assembly. 200 species sat in stunned silence as the screams echoed through the chamber. Then chaos erupted. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages, the translators struggling to keep pace. Order! The council premier, a massive being called Thongara, whose species had held the position for 6,000 years, slammed their appendage down. We must respond rationally. This is clearly a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Councillor Vexthar's harmonics turned sharp with disbelief. They destroyed our scouts. Perhaps they perceived a threat. We should send diplomats, open communication channels. There has never been a conflict that dialogue could not resolve. Vexthar wanted to argue but fell silent. The Premier was right, wasn't they? The Council had resolved every dispute through negotiation for 12 millennia. This would be no different. The diplomatic mission launched 3 weeks later. 12 ships, each carrying the Council's finest mediators, linguists, and cultural specialists. They broadcast friendship in every known language, and several theoretical ones. They transmitted mathematical proofs of peaceful intent. They offered gifts of art, music, and scientific knowledge. The aliens they encountered didn't care. The beings called themselves something the translators couldn't render properly. The council designated them the Khazir. They were insectoid in general form, but massive, each individual the size of a small vehicle. They moved with terrifying coordination, thousands acting as one. More importantly, they were hungry. The Khazir didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply consumed. Every planet they touched was stripped of biological matter within weeks. Cities, forests, oceans, people, everything organic became food for the swarm. The diplomatic mission was devoured within hours of making contact. Panic spread through council space like wildfire. Species that had never known fear began to understand it intimately. Worlds near the invasion route screamed for protection. The council activated defense fleets that had only ever performed in parades and training exercises. The first battle of Helion's world lasted 6 hours. The council fleet outnumbered the Khazir 3-1. They had superior technology, better shields, more powerful weapons. They fought by the book, executing maneuvers perfected over millennia of simulations. They lost. The Khazir didn't follow any tactical doctrine. They swarmed like locusts, absorbing losses that should have broken any sane commander's will. When council ships disabled Khazir vessels, the insects simply boarded from the wreckage, cutting through hulls and slaughtering crews in brutal close combat that no council species had trained for. 70% of the council fleet was destroyed. The rest fled. Helion's world, home to 4 billion people, fell within a week. The refugees from Helion's world told horror stories that the rest of the galaxy struggled to process. The Khazir didn't just kill, they harvested. They broke down bodies for nutrients with terrifying efficiency. They converted biomass into more soldiers, more ships, more swarm. Every battle made them stronger. World after world fell. Tharix Prime, jewel of the Outer Rim, population 12 billion, consumed in 17 days. The chorus stations, home to the singing melodians, silent within hours. The garden worlds of the peaceful collective where violence had been forgotten for 10,000 years, stripped to bare rock. The council's military commanders discovered they didn't know how to fight. Their tactics assumed rational opponents who valued their own survival. The Khazir valued only consumption. Standard doctrine said to disable enemy vessels and negotiate surrender. The Khazir turned disabled vessels into boarding platforms. 3 months after the first attack, 70 worlds had fallen, trillions dead or consumed. The Khazir swarm showed no signs of stopping. In the council chambers, the premier called an emergency session. "We need military assistance. We need warriors." "We have no warriors," Vexthar said quietly. "We are civilized beings. We have forgotten how to be anything else." "Then we must remember," the premier said, "or find those who have not forgotten." A junior counselor, a timid being whose species barely rated acknowledgement, spoke up. "What about the Death World species?" The chamber fell silent. "Earth?" Vexthar said. "The Class 7 species? What could they possibly offer?" The junior counselor pulled up data. "They are classified from a Class 12 Death World. Dr. Okonkwo's research suggests they evolved as apex predators. And their history—" The counselor hesitated. "They have never stopped fighting wars. Never. Their entire recorded history is continuous warfare." "Barbaric," someone muttered. "Perhaps," the junior counselor agreed. "But we need barbarians now. We need someone who remembers how to be predators." The debate lasted 3 days. Finally, desperation outweighed pride. The council transmitted a message to Earth, to the unremarkable Class 7 species they had dismissed and forgotten. They asked humanity for help. David Chen received the transmission in his small office on the council station. He read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The mighty Galactic Council, the civilization that had ignored humanity for 5 years, was begging. He composed himself and transmitted his response to Earth, knowing it would take weeks to arrive and weeks more for a reply. But he already knew what Earth would say. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day the Council dismissed them. They had studied. They had built. They had remembered the one thing they were truly good at: war. The prey had been overlooked. Now the predators would answer the call. And the galaxy would finally see what humanity really was. The emergency session of the United Nations took place within 6 hours of receiving the Council's distress call. Representatives from every nation filled the assembly hall, their faces grave as they watched footage from the Khazir attacks. The videos showed worlds burning, populations fleeing, council fleets disintegrating under swarm tactics. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the podium. At 63, she had led Earth through 5 years of cosmic humility, watching humanity accept their role as the galaxy's least important members. Now her expression was carved from stone. The Galactic Council requests military assistance against an enemy they call the Khazir, she said. They have lost 70 worlds in 3 months. Their fleets are broken. Their populations are dying. They are, in their own words, desperate. They ignored us, the Chinese delegate said flatly. For 5 years they treated us like children, like primitives. Now they want our help? Yes, Maria said simply. What do we owe them? The Russian representative leaned forward. They offered us nothing. No technology sharing beyond basic trade goods. No cultural exchange, no respect. Why should we risk our people for beings who never cared if we lived or died? Maria let the question hang in the air. Then she pressed a button and new footage played. A Khazir swarm descending on a city, civilians running, children screaming, the systematic harvesting of billions of lives. We don't do this for the Council, Maria said quietly. We do it because it's right. Because those are people dying. Because if we turn away, we become the very thing we always feared others thought we were: selfish, brutal, uncaring. And if we help them and lose? The Brazilian delegate asked. These Khazir destroyed fleets that vastly outnumbered them. What makes us think we can do better? Because we're different, a new voice said. Admiral Marcus Zhao entered the chamber, still in his naval uniform. He was younger than Maria, barely 50, but he commanded Earth's combined space forces. We've spent 5 years studying the Council's military doctrine. It's designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They haven't fought a real war in 12,000 years. We've never stopped. Marcus pulled up tactical displays. The Council fights like they're expecting rational opponents. They use minimum force. They aim to disable, not destroy. They assume enemies will surrender when faced with superior firepower. He shook his head. The Khazir don't surrender. They're a hive mind focused on consumption. Everything the Council knows about warfare is useless against them. And you think we can do better? The Indian delegate asked. I know we can, Marcus said, because we understand something the Council forgot. War isn't a debate. It's not a negotiation. War is about breaking the enemy's will and capacity to fight. The Khazir don't have individual will, so we focus on capacity. We target their production, their logistics, their ability to reproduce. We don't fight to persuade them to stop. We fight to make them unable to continue. He pulled up Earth's military assets, ships built in secret over 5 years, incorporating Council technology, but designed with human tactical doctrine. Marines trained for boarding actions because humans remembered that sometimes you had to take a ship by force. Weapons meant to destroy, not disable. We've been preparing, Marcus admitted. Not for this specifically, but for the possibility that the galaxy's peace wouldn't last forever. We studied their weaknesses. We built our strengths. And now, they need us. The debate continued for hours. Finally, Maria called for a vote. The resolution was simple. Would Earth commit military forces to assist the Galactic Council against the Khazir threat? The vote was unanimous. Yes. But it came with conditions. David Chen transmitted Earth's response to the Council 3 days later. The terms were blunt. Earth would provide military assistance. In exchange, humanity demanded full Council membership, immediate access to advanced technology, and operational command of any joint military operations. Human forces would answer to human commanders, not Council bureaucrats. The Council could accept Earth's help on humanity's terms or face the Khazir alone. The response came back within hours. Accepted. For the first time in galactic history, a Class 7 species would lead a military campaign. The Council had no choice. They had forgotten how to be warriors. Humanity had not. The mobilization began immediately. Admiral Zhao took command of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet. 47 ships, most smaller than Council vessels, but built for combat. 20,000 Marines prepared for deployment. Support staff, logistics coordinators, medical teams. Earth committed everything it had. Captain Maria Santos, the Secretary General's daughter, commanded the carrier ship Indomitable. At 32, she was young for such responsibility, but she had trained for this her entire adult life. She stood on her bridge watching Earth recede in the view screen, knowing she might never see home again. "All ships report ready, Captain," her executive officer said. "Signal the fleet," Maria ordered. "Jump coordinates locked. We're heading into the fire." The fleet jumped, tearing through space toward the war zone. Inside the troop bays, Marines checked their weapons and armor. Unlike Council forces, human soldiers trained for close combat. Every Marine carried weapons designed to kill in confined spaces. Rifles, shotguns, blades, explosives, tools for the brutal work of boarding actions and urban warfare. Sergeant John Park led a platoon of 40 Marines. He gathered them in the Indomitable's briefing room for their final pre-deployment meeting. "Listen up," Park said. "The Council thinks we're crazy for doing this. They think we're primitive because we still know how to fight. Let them think that. When we arrive, we're going to see things that will make you question if this is worth it. Dead worlds, billions killed, horrors the Council species can't even process because they've forgotten that the universe can be cruel." He looked at each face in turn. "We're going because no one else can. Because we're humanity. And we've survived every nightmare our own planet threw at us. We've faced extinction a dozen times, and we're still here. These bugs think they're apex predators? We're going to teach them what Earth produces." "Hoorah!" the Marines shouted. The fleet emerged from jump space at the Thraxis Gate, a strategic choke point the Council was desperately trying to hold. What they saw made even hardened soldiers pause. The system was a graveyard. Hundreds of destroyed ships drifted in orbital debris fields. A Council defense station, built to house 50,000 people, tumbled slowly through space, its hull breached in dozens of places. In the distance, the planet Thraxis burned, its atmosphere choked with smoke from continental fires. And the Khazir swarm was everywhere. Their ships were biological nightmares, grown rather than built. Massive organic vessels pulsed with alien life, disgorging smaller attack craft that swarmed like angry hornets. The ships didn't move like machines. They moved like living things, unpredictable and aggressive. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered on the bridge. "Contact Council forces," Admiral Zhao ordered from his flagship. "Let them know we're here, and prepare to engage." The Council's remaining ships, battered and barely holding formation, responded with shocked relief. A transmission came through from their commander, a being whose species Maria didn't recognize. "Human vessels, you must retreat. The swarm is too large. We cannot hold them." "Negative," Admiral Zhao replied calmly. "All Council ships fall back to defensive positions. We're going in." "You don't understand. They'll overwhelm you." "They can try," Zhao said. "All ships weapons free. Marines, prepare for boarding actions. Let's show them how Earth fights." The first expeditionary fleet accelerated toward the swarm. Council observers watched in horror. Certain they were witnessing humanity's suicide run. They were about to learn something important about Deathworld species. Humans didn't run from apex predators. Humans hunted them to extinction. The Battle of Thraxis Gate was beginning, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Khazir swarm engulfed the human fleet like a living wave. Hundreds of bioships swarmed around the 47 Earth vessels, firing organic projectiles that burst against shields like acid. The Council commanders, watching from their fallback positions, expected to see humanity's ships torn apart within minutes. Instead, they witnessed something they had never imagined. Admiral Zhao sat calmly in his command chair aboard the flagship Valiant, watching tactical displays track every enemy vessel. All ships, pattern Delta 7. Focus fire on the larger vessels. Marines, stand by for boarding operations. The human ships didn't scatter or flee. They moved together in coordinated packs, concentrating their firepower on individual targets. When a Khazir bioship's shields collapsed, human weapons didn't just disable it, they tore it apart. Railguns punched through organic hulls. Missiles carrying nuclear warheads detonated inside enemy vessels, vaporizing them from within. The Council doctrine of minimum force was nowhere in evidence. Humanity fought to kill. "Enemy vessel disabled, sir," reported the tactical officer. "Multiple hull breaches, but it's still intact." "Send in the Marines," Zhao ordered. Boarding pods launched from the Indomitable, small armored capsules that slammed into the wounded Khazir ship like bullets. The pod's drills chewed through the organic hull, and Marines poured into the breach. Captain Maria Santos watched from her bridge as her Marines entered hell. Inside the Khazir vessel, Sergeant Park's platoon encountered their first aliens up close. The bugs were massive, each one 2 meters tall with armored carapaces and blade-like limbs. They moved with insectoid speed, chittering in a language that sounded like grinding metal. "Contact front!" someone shouted. The corridor exploded with gunfire. Human rifles tore through the first wave of Khazir, dropping them in sprays of yellowish ichor. But more came, always more, streaming from deeper in the ship. "Grenades!" Park threw a fragmentation grenade into the mass of bodies. The explosion shredded a dozen bugs, but others simply climbed over the corpses, undeterred by casualties. This was what the Council couldn't do. They fought from a distance, with clean weapons and sanitized warfare. They had forgotten that sometimes you had to get close, had to smell the blood and feel the fear, had to push forward even when every instinct screamed to run. Humans remembered. Earth had taught them well. "Push forward!" Park led his Marines deeper into the ship, fighting for every meter. The Khazir were fierce opponents, but they were individuals within a hive mind. Humans were individuals who chose to work together, and that made all the difference. They reached the ship's core, a pulsing organic chamber where the hive's local coordinator lived. The creature was massive, 10 meters of armored insect with neural tendrils connecting it to the ship's systems. "Light it up," Park ordered. Concentrated fire tore into the coordinator. It shrieked, a sound that made human bones ache, and thrashed wildly. Marines died, crushed by massive limbs or torn apart by desperate counterattacks. But humans kept firing, kept advancing, until finally the coordinator fell. The ship died with it. The Khazir drones collapsed, their hive connections severed. Park stood in the ruined chamber, breathing hard, surrounded by dead Marines and dead bugs. "Objective secured," he reported, requesting extraction. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human Marines boarded enemy vessels, fought brutal close-quarters battles, and destroyed hive coordinators. It was bloody work that cost lives, but it worked. The Khazir had never faced an enemy willing to board their ships. The Council fought from safety at a distance. Humans charged into the teeth of the swarm and killed it from within. Admiral Zhao watched the tactical display update as one Khazir ship after another went dark. All vessels, maintain formation. Target the next cluster. Keep the pressure on. A transmission came through from the Council commander. How are you doing this? We tried boarding actions in the first week. The casualties were unsustainable. Yes, Zhao acknowledged. We're losing Marines, but we're winning the battle. Sometimes you have to pay the price. It was a calculus the Council had forgotten. They couldn't accept losses anymore, couldn't stomach the cost of victory. 12,000 years of peace had made them soft. Humanity had never had that luxury. Earth was a planet where everything was trying to kill you, where you learned early that survival required sacrifice. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships danced through the swarm, their tactics confusing the hive mind. They didn't fight the way the Council did, following predictable patterns. They adapted constantly, using maneuvers that made no tactical sense, until suddenly they did, and another Khazir cluster was destroyed. Captain Santos commanded the Indomitable through a particularly vicious engagement, using the carrier's bulk to shield smaller destroyers while they made attack runs. A Khazir bioship tried to ram her vessel, the organic craft accelerating on a suicide trajectory. "Evasive maneuvers," Santos ordered calmly. "We can't turn fast enough," her helmsman shouted. "Then we don't turn. All forward batteries, fire everything." The Indomitable's main railguns unleashed a storm of metal. The Khazir ship's organic armor couldn't withstand the concentrated barrage. It shattered like a dropped egg, fragments scattering harmlessly against the Indomitable's shields. "Damage report," Santos said. "Minor hull scoring. Shields at 60%. We're good to continue, Captain." Santos allowed herself a small smile. "Excellent. Helm, bring us about. There's more work to do." The Khazir swarm began to falter. The hive mind was intelligent in its own way, capable of learning and adapting. It learned that human ships were more dangerous than they appeared. It learned that boarding actions went both ways, and humans were better at it. It learned that these new enemies didn't flinch from casualties or shy from brutal combat. The swarm began to withdraw. "They're retreating!" The Council commander's transmission crackled with disbelief. "The Khazir are actually retreating!" Admiral Zhao watched the enemy pull back, regrouping at the system's edge. "Don't celebrate yet. They're not beaten, just reassessing. All ships, form defensive perimeter around Thraxis. We hold this position." The human fleet settled into formation, battered but intact. They had lost 9 ships and over 3,000 Marines. By Council standards, the casualties were catastrophic. They would have retreated after losing 1/10 that many. By human standards, it was an acceptable cost for a strategic victory. Sergeant Park stood in the Indomitable's medical bay, watching doctors work on wounded Marines. Some would live, some wouldn't. He thought about the coordinator he'd killed, the Marines he'd lost, the price of this single battle. Worth it? He didn't know. But necessary? Absolutely. A young Marine, barely 20, lay on a bed with bandages covering most of her torso. She looked up at Park and managed a weak smile. "Did we win, Sergeant?" "Yeah, Private. We won." "Good," she whispered and closed her eyes. Park left the medical bay and headed to the briefing room. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Khazir would regroup, adapt, return, and humanity would be there to meet them. Because that's what apex predators did. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They fought until the threat was eliminated. Across Council space, reports of the Battle of Thraxis Gate spread like wildfire. The unremarkable Class 7 species, the overlooked humans from the Death World, had done what no Council force had managed. They had stopped the Khazir. In Council chambers, debate erupted. Some celebrated humanity's success. Others feared it. These primitive warriors had accomplished in one battle what Council fleets couldn't do in 3 months. What did that say about the Council? What did it say about humanity? Counselor Vexithar studied the battle reports with growing unease. The humans had taken casualties that would devastate a Council species' entire military, and they were already preparing for the next engagement. They didn't mourn, didn't pause, didn't question. They just kept fighting. What have we unleashed? Vexthar wondered aloud. The junior counselor, who had first suggested seeking Earth's help, responded quietly, "Not unleashed, counselor. We asked for their help. We begged for it, and they answered. Will they stop when the Khazir are defeated?" The question hung unanswered, because nobody knew. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as unremarkable, had ignored them as insignificant. But now humanity was proving they were neither. They were survivors from a nightmare world. They were warriors who had never forgotten how to fight. They were apex predators wearing the face of civilization. And the galaxy was finally paying attention. Admiral Zhao stood on the Valiant's bridge, looking at star maps showing Khazir incursions across Council space. So many worlds threatened. So many battles ahead. The war was far from over, but humanity had shown they could win. Now they just had to prove they could finish it. The hunt had begun. The war room aboard the Valiant filled with holographic displays showing the entire war zone. Admiral Zhao stood at the center, surrounded by his commanders and Council military liaisons. The victory at Thrax's Gate had bought them breathing room, but only barely. The Khazir have withdrawn to 3 primary staging areas. Zhao indicated the positions on the tactical display. Here, here, and here. They're consolidating, likely breeding more soldiers and growing new bioships. Standard doctrine would be to fortify our defensive positions and wait for them to attack. That is the recommended approach, said Counselor Vexithar, attending the meeting via hologram. Establish strong defensive lines and bleed them when they advance. Zhao shook his head. That's a losing strategy. Every day we wait, they consume more biomass from conquered worlds and grow stronger. We need to hit them before they're ready. The Council liaison, a floating sphere named Quarix, made a sound of distress. Attack? Into their strongholds? That's suicide. It's aggressive, Zhao corrected. But it's also unexpected. The Khazir have learned that Council forces are reactive, defensive. They won't anticipate an attack into their staging areas. Because it's insane, Quarix said. Captain Santos stepped forward. With respect, Counselor, our doctrine is different from yours. We don't wait for the enemy to choose when and where to fight. We take the initiative. Your species has been in space for 5 years, Vexthar said. The Council has maintained peace for 12,000. Perhaps our experience has made you forget how to win wars, Santos interrupted. The Council members bristled, but she continued. Peace is wonderful. We hope to achieve it someday. But you can't negotiate with the Khazir. You can only destroy them. And destruction requires aggression, not patience. Zhao pulled up battle plans. We'll split our forces. The main fleet will strike their largest staging area at Karath's Nebula. Diversionary forces will engage the other 2 positions to prevent reinforcement. We hit hard, destroy their breeding facilities, and withdraw before they can mount a coordinated response. The plan was presented to the full Council within hours. The debate lasted 3 days. The Council had never authorized an offensive military operation on this scale. Their entire military philosophy was built on defense and deterrence, but they were losing the defensive war. 70 worlds had fallen. More were threatened daily. The Khazir weren't deterred by anything except overwhelming force. Finally, desperately, the Council authorized humanity's plan. Earth's fleet had grown. More ships arrived from human colonies, smaller vessels built quickly using Council materials and human designs. Marine reinforcements came too, volunteers from every nation on Earth and every human settlement in space. Sergeant Park found himself training new recruits in the Indomitable's gym. Young men and women, some barely old enough to serve, all determined to fight. "Why are you here?" he asked one recruit, a girl from the Mars colonies named Chen. "You could have stayed safe. Let someone else do the fighting." "My grandmother is Sarah Okonkwo," Chen said, "the xenobiologist. She showed me the data on what makes us different. We're not special because we're better than other species. We're special because Earth made us tough. If we don't use that toughness when it matters, what's the point of surviving at all?" Park understood. That's why he was here too. That's why thousands of humans had volunteered. Not for glory, not for the Council's gratitude, but because this was what humans did. They faced the nightmare and fought back. The assault on Karath's nebula began at 400 station time. 60 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the nebula's edge, their sensors immediately picking up massive Khazir presence. The staging area was enormous. Dozens of bioships orbited a dying star, harvesting its energy for growth acceleration. Breeding pods floated in clusters, each one capable of producing thousands of Khazir soldiers. And at the center, a superhive, a massive organic structure the size of a small moon, coordinating the entire swarm in this sector. "Target the breeding pods first," Zhao ordered. "Destroy their production capability. Then we go for the superhive." The human fleet split into attack wings, each targeting a different cluster of pods. The Khazir response was immediate and furious. Bioships swarmed toward the intruders, organic weapons firing streams of acid and explosive spores. But humanity had learned from Thraxus. They knew the enemy's patterns now, understood how the hive mind reacted to threats. "They're trying to envelop us," Santos observed from the Indomitable's bridge. "Classic swarm behavior. Helm, take us straight into the largest cluster. Full speed." "Into them?" the helmsman questioned. "They expect us to run. We're going to kill their coordinators instead. Do it." The Indomitable accelerated into the heart of the enemy formation, its escorts following. The maneuver was crazy by Council standards. You didn't charge directly at superior numbers. But humans had a different calculation. If you could kill the leadership fast enough, numbers didn't matter. Marines stood ready in boarding pods, watching their captain deliberately fly into hell to get them close enough to strike. "Launching pods in 30 seconds, Santos announced. "Marines, you know your targets. Core coordinators only. Make every shot count." The pods launched, hundreds of armored capsules screaming across the void toward Khazir bioships. Point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, coming too fast. The pods slammed home, drills chewing through organic hulls. Park led his platoon into a breeding ship, a massive vessel pulsing with disgusting biological processes. The interior was humid and reeked of decay. Khazir defenders swarmed immediately, but the Marines were ready. This time they had flamers, weapons the Council considered barbaric. The humans considered them effective. Gouts of fire washed through the corridors, incinerating bugs by the dozen. The Khazir's organic ships burned beautifully. "Breeding chamber ahead," someone shouted. They breached into an enormous cavity filled with pods, each one containing developing Khazir soldiers. Thousands of them. Park didn't hesitate. "Burn it all." The Marines unleashed hell. Flamers, explosives, incendiary rounds. They destroyed everything. The breeding chamber became an inferno. Khazir defenders threw themselves at the humans in desperate counterattacks, but it was too late. The damage was done. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human Marines systematically destroyed breeding facilities, killing the Khazir's ability to replace losses. The superhive tried to coordinate a response, but humanity's attack was too fast, too chaotic, hitting too many targets simultaneously. Admiral Zhao watched the tactical display update. "Good. They're confused. All ships, converge on the superhive. We end this now." The entire human fleet focused their fire on the massive central structure. The superhive's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to repel ships, not the concentrated firepower of an attacking fleet that didn't care about its own casualties. "Nuclear weapons free," Zhao ordered. Missiles carrying fusion warheads streaked toward the superhive. The Khazir's point defense destroyed most of them, but not all. 3 warheads detonated against the structure's core, tearing massive wounds in its organic hull. "Marines, you're authorized for deep penetration strike," Zhao said. Santos knew what that meant. A suicide mission. Someone had to go into the dying superhive and destroy its central coordinator before it could regenerate. "I'm going," she said. "Captain, you're needed on your ship. My XO can command the Indomitable. This needs someone who won't hesitate." Santos was already moving toward the hangar. "Park, gather your best Marines. We're going into that thing." 20 minutes later, a single assault shuttle launched from the Indomitable, carrying Captain Santos and 50 Marines directly toward the superhive. The structure was dying, but slowly, trying to heal itself even as fires consumed its interior. They crashed through a ruptured section of hull and entered hell itself. The superhive's interior was a nightmare landscape of organic tunnels, pulsing with alien life. Khazir swarmed from every direction, desperately defending their coordinator. The Marines fought room to room, corridor to corridor, pushing deeper into the structure. Santos lost half her force in the first hour, but they kept advancing. This was the mission. This was what had to be done. They reached the coordinator chamber. The thing was massive, a bloated insectoid entity connected to thousands of neural tendrils, its mind coordinating millions of Khazir across dozens of star systems. "Light it up," Santos ordered. Every Marine opened fire simultaneously. Bullets, rockets, grenades, and flames converged on the coordinator. The creature screamed, a psychic wail that made human brains hurt. It lashed out with tendrils thick as tree trunks, crushing Marines in its death throes. Santos climbed onto its bulk, placed a nuclear charge directly against its central neural cluster, and activated the timer. "Fall back! 30 seconds!" The surviving Marines ran. Santos ran with them, knowing they wouldn't make it, knowing the blast radius was too large. But they tried anyway, because that's what humans did. They fought until the end. The nuclear device detonated deep in the superhive's core. The explosion tore through the structure, converting biomass to plasma. The superhive's death scream echoed across multiple dimensions, and every Khazir connected to it collapsed instantly. Across the battlefield, thousands of bioships went dormant as their coordination vanished. Human vessels moved through them methodically, destroying each one. A search and rescue team found Santos and 6 Marines in a sealed compartment, barely alive but breathing. They had survived. Somehow, impossibly, they had survived. Admiral Zhao watched the Karath staging area burn. "All forces withdraw, mission accomplished." The attack had cost 20 ships and 8,000 lives. By human standards, it was a costly victory. By the standards of this war, it was a devastating blow to the enemy. The Council watched in stunned silence as humanity did the impossible. They hadn't just stopped the Khazir, they had destroyed one of their major staging areas. The offensive war had begun, and humanity was winning. Counselor Vexthar studied the reports, feeling something they had never felt before. Not gratitude, not relief, fear. These humans fought with a calculated brutality that terrified. They accepted casualties that would break any council species. They charged into hopeless situations and somehow emerged victorious. They were proving to be exactly what the galaxy needed against the Khazir. But what would happen when the Khazir were defeated? What would the galaxy do with a warrior species that had just learned it was the most dangerous force in known space? The question haunted Vexithar's thoughts as they watched humanity's fleet regroup for the next offensive. The Khazir were learning to fear the humans. Soon, the Council would too. The campaign continued for 6 brutal months. Humanity's forces struck at Khazir positions across Council space with relentless aggression. Each battle followed the same pattern. Identify the enemy stronghold, assault it before they could prepare, destroy their coordinators and breeding facilities, withdraw. It was warfare reduced to its most basic formula. Find the enemy and kill them faster than they could kill you. The strategy worked. The Khazir swarm, which had seemed unstoppable just months before, began to falter. Without time to breed new soldiers and grow new bioships, their numbers dwindled. Human Marines became legendary for their boarding actions, striking into the heart of Hive vessels and destroying them from within. But the victories came at a terrible cost. Earth's casualty lists grew longer each week. Ships destroyed, Marines killed, entire crews lost to the void. The numbers climbed into the hundreds of thousands. For a species numbering only 8 billion spread across a handful of worlds, the losses were devastating. Yet humanity didn't stop, couldn't stop, because stopping meant letting the Khazir recover, and that meant more worlds consumed, more species exterminated. Admiral Zhao stood in his ready room, looking at names scrolling across his screen. The dead from last week's assault on the Burning Veil cluster. 3,000 names. 3,000 people who would never go home. "You should rest, sir," his aide said quietly. Later, Zhao kept reading. Every commander should know the cost of their orders. Every name deserved to be seen, even if he couldn't remember them all. A priority transmission interrupted his vigil. "Admiral, Council transmission incoming. Priority Alpha." Zhao accepted the call. Counselor Vexthar's crystalline form appeared in hologram. "Admiral Zhao, we have detected a massive Khazir concentration at the Burning Veil Nebula. Our intelligence suggests this is their final major stronghold in Council space." "How many?" "At least 500 bioships, possibly more. Multiple superhives." Vexthar's harmonics carried worry. "Admiral, this may be beyond even your force's capability. We should consider a siege strategy, containment rather than assault." "And let them build strength?" Zhao shook his head. "No. We've pushed them back this far. Now we finish it. The casualties will be enormous." "Yes." Zhao met the alien's gaze steadily. "They will be. But if we don't end this now, we'll be fighting them for years. More worlds will fall. More people will die. This needs to end." Vexthar was silent for a long moment. "The Council will authorize the operation. But, Admiral, please understand, if you fail, there are no reserves. Humanity's fleet will be gone. Earth will be defenseless." "I know." The transmission ended. Zhao returned to his list of names, reading every single one before he began planning humanity's largest offensive yet. The Battle of the Burning Veil would be remembered as the bloodiest engagement in galactic history. Every available human vessel converged on the nebula. 143 ships carrying 50,000 Marines and crew. Everything humanity had built, everyone they could spare, thrown into one massive assault. The Council sent observers but no combat vessels. They had nothing left that could help, and everyone knew it. This was humanity's fight. Captain Santos commanded a battle group from the repaired Indomitable. She looked at her crew, exhausted, traumatized, but still ready to fight. They had been at war for 6 months. Some of these people had never known peacetime in space. "Captain, we're receiving tactical downloads from the flagship," her tactical officer reported. "Assault plan is coming through." Santos studied the data. The plan was simple because it had to be. The Burning Veil contained too many enemies for complex maneuvers. This would be a straight fight, human ferocity against Khazir numbers. They would win or die here. There was no middle ground. "All hands, this is the captain," Santos broadcast across her ship. We've fought the Khazir for half a year. We've beaten them on a dozen worlds. Today we end this war. The enemy has gathered everything they have left in this nebula. So have we. One of us walks away from this battle. Make sure it's us. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the nebula's edge. What they saw defied comprehension. The Khazir had converted the entire nebula into a fortress. Bioships clustered so thickly they blocked the stars. Breeding stations floated in clouds, pumping out new soldiers even as the battle began. And at the nebula's heart, 3 superhives orbited each other in a grotesque dance, their combined intelligence coordinating the entire swarm. All ships, Admiral Zhao's voice cut through the stunned silence. Weapons free, engage at will. Today we hunt. The human fleet charged into the nightmare. The battle was chaos from the first moment. Khazir swarms engulfed human ships, tearing at shields with organic weapons. Human vessels fought back with every weapon they had, creating spheres of destruction around themselves. Nuclear warheads detonated like new stars. Railgun slugs tore through bioships at relativistic speeds. Laser batteries carved glowing wounds across organic hulls. And Marines launched their boarding pods, knowing most wouldn't return. Sergeant Park led his platoon into yet another hive vessel. He'd stopped counting how many he'd boarded. 5? 10? His Marines were a mixture of veterans and rookies now, the veterans teaching the rookies how to stay alive in Khazir corridors. Stick together, he ordered. Watch your corners. Don't let them separate us. The fighting was brutal and personal. No room for tactics beyond shoot everything that moves. The Khazir fought with desperate ferocity, defending their last stronghold. Humans fought with grim determination, knowing this was the final push. Park's platoon fought to a coordinator chamber and destroyed it, then moved to the next target, and the next. Boarding action after boarding action, each one grinding down their numbers, but they kept going, because that's what humans did. Captain Santos led the Indomitable deep into the enemy formation, her ship taking terrible damage but refusing to fall back. Her engineering crew performed miracles keeping the systems running. Her gunners fired until their weapons overheated, then fired some more. A Khazir superhive turned its attention to the Indomitable, seeing the threat it represented. Bioweapons concentrated on the human carrier, overwhelming its shields. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks. Damage control teams to sections 12 through 18, Santos ordered calmly, even as her ship shook from impacts. Maintain fire on that superhive. Captain, we can't take much more of this. Then we make it count. Load nuclear torpedoes, maximum yield. I want a solution that puts them through that thing's core. That will require us to get dangerously close. I know. Do it. The Indomitable accelerated toward the superhive, taking punishment with every meter. Santos watched her crew work. These people who had trusted her through 6 months of hell and felt pride overwhelming her fear. Torpedoes away! 6 nuclear warheads streaked toward the superhive. Point defense destroyed 4. The remaining 2 penetrated deep into the structure before detonating. The superhive shuddered, mortally wounded but not dead. It thrashed wildly, its dying commands sending connected Khazir into frenzies. All vessels, concentrate fire on the wounded superhive, Admiral Zhao ordered. Finish it! 20 human ships poured fire into the dying structure. Explosions rippled across its surface, and finally, catastrophically, it died. 1 down, 2 to go. The battle raged for 72 hours. Humans fought in shifts, catching rest when they could, returning to the fight when needed. The Khazir never rested because the hive mind didn't need to. But humans had something the hive mind didn't understand: individual determination. Each Marine, each ship captain, each crew member made the personal choice to keep fighting even when exhausted, terrified, and facing impossible odds. The second superhive fell when Admiral Zhao led a suicide squadron directly into its core, sacrificing his flagship and 3 escort vessels to deliver a massive nuclear payload. The admiral survived, barely, rescued from a lifeboat by another human ship. The third and final superhive tried to flee, retreating deeper into the nebula. Captain Santos, now commanding what remained of the human fleet after Zhao's injury, refused to let it escape. "All ships, pursuit course. We end this today." The chase lasted 6 hours, human vessels running at maximum speed to catch the fleeing hive. When they finally cornered it against a stellar mass where it couldn't jump to faster-than-light travel, Santos gave the order every human had been waiting for. "All ships, final assault. Kill it." The combined firepower of humanity's remaining vessels hammered the superhive. It fought back desperately, destroying human ships even as it died. The Indomitable took a direct hit that killed half her crew, but Santos kept her on target, kept her weapons firing. And finally, the last superhive fell silent. The Khazir swarm, deprived of all coordination, collapsed. The remaining bioships drifted aimlessly, unable to function without hive guidance. Human forces moved through them methodically, ensuring none survived to breed a new swarm. 6 months of warfare, hundreds of battles. And now, finally, silence. Captain Santos sat in her damaged command chair, looking at casualty reports. 60 ships destroyed out of 143, 28,000 dead. The Indomitable alone had lost 300 crew. But they had won. The Khazir threat was eliminated. Council space was safe. Santos activated a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Santos. The war is over. We won." The cheering that erupted across the fleet was muted, exhausted. These were people who had given everything they had. Victory felt less like triumph and more like survival. Back on Earth, the news spread slowly at first, then explosively. Humanity had done the impossible. The overlooked Class 7 species had saved the galaxy. But even as Earth celebrated, Admiral Zhao sat in a medical bay, recovering from his injuries and worried about what came next. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. They had watched humans fight with a brutality and effectiveness that no council species possessed. They had seen Earth's warriors accomplish in 6 months what the council couldn't do in millennia: wage total war and win. Gratitude was inevitable, but so was fear. And Zhao knew, as any student of history knew, that fear eventually turned to other things: resentment, suspicion, hostility. Humanity had proven they were the galaxy's supreme predators. Now they would have to navigate being the most dangerous species in known space. The war with the Khazir was over, but humanity's real challenges were just beginning.